Hi guys, this is the questions for Chapter 21, Sections 3 and 4, British Rule in India and Nation Building in Latin America. Again, I'm going to do like the last time, run through these and try to give some additional information, make some connections for you. So let's get started. Starting with the essential questions, what was the goal of the Indian National Congress? I think that one is pretty self-explanatory. Why was India called the jewel in the crown of the Empress of India? And we want to see also who was the Empress of India. How did the American Revolution inspire political changes in Latin America? And why did eliminating European dominion from Latin America not bring about significant economic change there? So number one here, after the uprising, the British Parliament transferred the powers of the British East India Company directly to the British government, and this leader was given the title of Empress of India. So go back to that question we just had. That's going to be Queen Victoria. By the way, this is one of those really bad questions. Empress can only be the female, so queen. So anyway, this is Queen Victoria, as we talked about in the last section. She's the Queen of England. Her uncle, Leopold of Belgium, was the guy in the Belgian Congo. That's her husband, Prince Albert, of the Royal Albert Hall in London, and he's also her uncle's son. It's complicated. Okay, this is the name for the Indian soldiers hired by the British East India Company, and I've got the picture up there already. These are sepoys. Okay, and depending on the region they're from, they're going to have various different sort of uniforms and regiments as well. Moving on here, the 1857 revolt in India was called the Great Rebellion, or the Sepoy Mutiny, by the British, and the First War of Independence by the Indians. That's true. The Sepoy Rebellion, not a fun thing. When they actually got done, they executed some of the leaders of this by, yes, they are strapped to cannons that were then fired. Sorry. A major immediate cause of the Sepoy Mutiny was the spread of a rumor that the British were issuing Indian troops with new bullets greased with chicken fat, and that is false. It was that they were greased with pork fat and beef fat. Let's stop and think about that. This is a country of mostly Hindus for whom cows are sacred, so that makes for the Hindus the beef fat a really bad thing. And the other people are Muslims who can't eat pork, so that makes the pork fat a problem. This is what the cartridges looked like here. They had to literally tear them open with their teeth. Therein lies the problem. Pour it down the musket and ram it in, so as opposed to having to put powder, a ball, patch, and everything. And these were sort of kind of a quick combination of that, still a muzzle-loading weapon. This is the site of a massacre of 200 women and children by Indians armed with swords and knives. And when the British recaptured the city, they took their revenge and executed the Indians. This is in Kanpur. Okay. This is sort of a depiction from the British point of view of what happened here. And so when they got done, they actually massacred a much greater number of Indians. This is the British governor in India who ruled as a representative of the monarch of Great Britain. This is a position called a viceroy. This is something we also saw in South America, where a lot of the early areas, when they were controlled by Spain or Portugal, were viceroyalties of. It's like the viceroyalty of Colombia. This is a viceroy here. In this case, notice the Indians now are paying homage. They're not really co-equals like they had been in the past. The British civil servant staff of about 35,000 officials ruled almost 30 million Indian people, the largest colonial empire in the world. That's false because it was only 3,500 ruling those 300 million Indian people. Okay. This is India at the time, which would today be India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and parts of Myanmar were all part of British India at the time. He set up schools to train Indian children to serve in the government and the army. However, 90% of the Indian population remained illiterate. That's Lord Thomas Macaulay. And again, the goal here was to set up a sort of trained group of Indian children to serve in the government, in the bureaucracy, and in the army, in positions mostly as like translators and things like that. The vast majority of the population was still untrained peasants. That's Lord Thomas. The British use of local tax officials called zamindars kept the Indian peasants happy. No. Nobody likes tax collectors. Zamindars were appointed by them and were seen as being basically traitors to the Indian people. A small group of Indians met in Mumbai in 1885 and formed this group that called for a share in the governing process. That is, should be pretty easy to get out of this one, the Indian National Congress, which eventually goes on to lead the revolution and gain independence for India. This is a photo of the original first meeting of the Indian National Congress. He studied in London, became a lawyer. He worked in South Africa where he faced racial discrimination. Later began the movement that would lead to Indian independence, that is Mohandas Gandhi. This is Mohandas Gandhi. He's a young lawyer, I believe, right before or either when he went to South Africa. He was pretty upset by the inequalities in the world because he saw himself being relatively equal when he was in London at school. When he goes to South Africa, he's got a first-class ticket and he's thrown off the train because he should be in the third class because he's colored. This is him, probably more famous later in life when he's wearing his homespun in terms of getting independence for India. The British encouraged Indian farmers to grow cotton, and encouraged is sort of the politically correct word there, instead of food, and the resulting food shortages caused 30 million deaths between 1800 and 1900. Yes, 30 million deaths over a century. You think somewhere in that time period we could have figured out a solution. It was a terrible situation. People were dying in the streets, looking like literally Auschwitz survivors. And this one I'm just going to leave up for a second. Starving men, women, and children. This illustrious Indian author was also a social reformer, spiritual leader, educator, philosopher, singer, painter, international spokesperson for the moral concerns of his age. Could he do anything else to make us all look bad? This is Rabindranath Tagore. Overachiever. Okay, social classes based on privilege divided colonial Latin America. We're shifting now from India to Latin America. And this group is made up of Spanish or Portuguese officials who lived only temporarily in Latin America to make political and economic gains before they returned to their mother country. These are folks called peninsulares because they came from the Iberian Peninsula of Europe, which is Spain and Portugal. They're the really upper class in Latin America. Okay, I got my pictures messed up here. The 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, is Mexico's Independence Day. That is false, that it commemorates the Mexican Empire's victory over the French Empire at the Battle of Puebla in 1862, a much later time period. Under the leadership of Zaragoza there. I forgot about Ignacio there, sorry. This parish priest was the first real hero of Mexican independence movement, even though his forces were crushed and he was sentenced to death. This is Miguel Hidalgo. This is him here. In September of 1810 is when they start the uprising. In January 1818, he's captured and executed. It's August 24th before they finally get their independence with the Treaty of Cordoba. But if you look again, that's 1821, much earlier, 40 years more earlier than Cinco de Mayo. Okay, this social class is based on privilege, divided colonial Latin America. This group was made up of European descendants who lived in Latin America permanently and were attracted to the principles of equality, freedom, free trade rather, and free press. These are the Creoles or Criollos. This is sometimes referred to as Peninsulares and Insulares, folks who were descendants of Peninsulares born in the New World, especially called Insulares if they moved back to Europe later on. Even though the Creoles resented Peninsulares, conservative elites, they worked together and overthrew Spanish rule. The Peninsulares did this not to get their own freedom for all, but to preserve their own power, and that's true. So the Peninsulares are working together with the conservative elites because this is that situation we always see in terms of in power situations and revolutions. Everybody wants freedom and independence, but the people at the top want to maintain the social order as much as possible. So the Criollos are working with the people at the top to keep the vast majority of the people still basically in servitude. The rebellion that led to the first independent state in Latin America took place in which of the following countries? Haiti. Toussaint Louverture led the revolution in Haiti. Haiti is part of Hispaniola here, that island, which is today split between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haiti on the western side, Dominican Republic on the eastern side. This shows it sort of San Domingo there when it was French territory. Okay, social classes based on privilege again divided colonial Latin America. This group is mixed people in Latin America who are mixed European and Indian descent. Those are mestizos. When we said mixed European and African were mulattoes, well, mixed European and Indian descent, especially in Latin America, are mestizos. The social structure was hugely complex. People had to marry sort of within their own little designations. Here alone, you see 16 various social classes. This is almost like the caste system in India. But what you're seeing here is people can kind of marry, because these are literally like Spanish and Indian, and then various different groups showing, and they're all showing a child because they're saying based on who this child was, and even based upon who was the European and who was the Indian in terms of male or female, determine what the child was going to be determined or called. President James Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine to guarantee the independence of the new Latin American nations, and it warned European nations and countries against intervention in the Americas. That is true. There's Monroe there, issuing the Monroe Doctrine. This is a political cartoon because I love him. Here's our Uncle Sam here keeping people out saying, no trespassing, America for Americans. But notice Americans also includes Nicaraguans and Argentinians, other different groups. And it's kind of interesting because those wouldn't be considered Americans today per se. We're keeping out John Bull here, the British, the Spanish that we see over here, the Germans, Portugal. Everybody's got a little spot in there, France as well. Initially, when this was issued, we didn't really have the political power to stop anyone from intervening into those areas. Luckily for us, at the time, they were becoming more interested in Africa and Southeast Asia and those areas. So their exploration was more in those areas to get, and there were plantations in the Caribbean, which were making them a lot more money. This Latin American leader was from Venezuela, and he was one of the two members of the Creole elite hailed as the two liberators or liberators of South America. From Venezuela, we're talking about Simón Bolívar. Bolívar, help people get independence. They should name a country for him, like Bolivia. This Latin American leader was from Argentina, and he was one of two members of the Creole elite hailed as the liberators of South America. This is José de San Martín. There, San Martín. Hey, look at these guys in their fancy over-the-top uniforms. The new Latin American countries began with Republican governments, but with no experience in ruling themselves, strong leaders called blank came to power, ruling by military force and with the support of the landed elites. These are caudillos, okay? These guys came to power to help bring stability because people were willing to give up these Republican governments and the right to vote for some stability and safety in terms of their social contact. Now, remember, in U.S. history, we had that time period of salutary neglect. And you'll study that again in U.S. history, most of you. And what they're talking about is that's a time period when Britain sort of let the American colonies, there are colonies in America, do what they wanted to and run themselves. It's that experience of running ourselves prior to the events that led up to the French Indian War, the 7 Years' War, and then the Revolution. Prior to that time period when they were letting us run ourselves, we gained the experience we needed to be able to run ourselves, rule ourselves rather, afterwards. This Latin American ruler ruled Mexico during the Texas Revolt, led by American settlers, that created the Republic of Texas in 1836. That's General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Sometimes we just refer to him in U.S. history as Santa Anna. Ah, look, another over-the-top military uniform. This leader of Mexico brought about liberal reforms, including the separation of church and state, land distribution to the poor, trying to upset that cart of the Peninsulares and Creoles having all the power, and set up an education system for all of Mexico. That is Benito Juarez. Okay, there's Benito, a little bit more modern and not the over-the-top sort of military powerful uniform there. And if you look right across from El Paso, Texas, the border town for El Paso is Ciudad Juarez. Connection? Yeah. The newly independent countries of Latin America were politically independent, but were still economically dependent on Spain and Portugal. That is false. They became independent, but they became very much economically dependent upon the United States. This little graph as it runs through sort of showing their independence movements and changes as we go along here. So moving from viceroyalties to independence to 1812. Remember, we're involved in a war with England. I'm going to let this play out. Notice that already at this time period, Haiti is an independent country. And so, they're showing red being Spain. The colors change, I'm not sure why, from red to yellow. (1821), seeing that first Mexican independence. We're seeing some more independence going on there. The Dominican Republic is now independent. Now all they're down to is a little bit of Bolivia in 1825. Let's see if it goes to, I don't think it's going to go all the way to, yeah, it doesn't go to the Spanish-American War. Okay, moving on here, the Spanish-American War in 1898, which ended after the 1890 War, which ended in 1898, excuse me. Cuba was annexed by the United States, and Puerto Rico became a U.S. protectorate. I have those underlined because they're exactly backwards. Cuba became a U.S. protectorate. Puerto Rico was annexed by the United States and is still a U.S. territory today. Okay, so this is talking about sort of the war with Spain and talking about some of the different things going on there, and it shows here's Spain and Cuba. This is sort of a map in the paper from the time period showing what things were going on, and not just Cuba down here and Puerto Rico, but also showing the Pacific, the Philippine Islands. The first battle of which was at the Battle of Manila Bay, where they destroyed the Spanish fleet. Notice that's in May of 1890. It's not till August that they, us fighting with Filipinos, destroy or defeat the Spanish in terms of their land forces. Okay, this is showing sort of the things going on in the Caribbean, which is the other theater of fighting during the Spanish-American War. Okay. Which American president supported the rebellion that allowed Panama to become separate from Colombia and become a new nation. That is the guy for whom teddy bears are named, Theodore Roosevelt. This is, the red outline shows what was Colombia beforehand. It's actually showing some of the political districts within Colombia, Panama being, of course, this region here. I don't know if most U.S. students study enough geography to realize that it doesn't run north and south. It basically, the country runs east-west. And moving on here, we came in and basically guaranteed their independence. If you want to have an independence movement and become an independent country, having the U.S. come in and blockade the Colombians so they can't come back and take you over, giving you $250 million, no war debt, $250 million in the bank. That's how you start your independence. And this is the USS GOP, which is the Republican Party or the Grand Old Party. Their symbol is the elephant, and these tusks now are cannons. The Panamanians here, yay! This is the Roosevelt Doctrine, actually referred to as the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And another political cartoon, extra indelible ink, and where do we draw the canal at? Just where the paper tore when he's signing his name. And here he is during this new treaty to make sure them to get their independence, which is signified here by their flag. Notice the ships when they come through the canal that he's digging. And where's he throwing the dirt? On Bogota, which would be the capital of Colombia. Okay, number 30 here, the middle sectors or divisions of Latin America, society, lawyers, merchants, shopkeepers, business people, school teachers, professors, bureaucrats, and military officials accounted for only 5 to 10% of the population. That is true. Okay, so we think middle class, but middle class in terms of population is less than 10%. So still, again, the vast majority of the population is poor, people who are by this time period mostly mixed race peoples. Okay, there was an extra credit question. The Panama Canal has been undergoing expansion since 2007, and its reopening was inaugurated a few years ago. That was in 2016 is when it took place, and it more than doubled its capacity. Ships went from a new size of ship that could carry almost twice as much cargo on a single ship. We called these Panamax ships, Panama coming from the Panama Canal, and max because the maximum capacity can fit through there. And they literally pass the canal. It's like almost touching the sides. Our questions. So the goal of the International Congress was to get independence from Great Britain. India was called the crown jewel and the Empress of India. They're making tons of money selling materials to them and using them as a supply force for their cotton, which they take back and weave into materials from the Industrial Revolution and selling all over the world. The American Revolution inspired political changes in Latin America. They see us as being something that they want for themselves as well. And eliminating European domination didn't bring about significant changes because the political elites go back to take power to bring stability and keep control of that power for themselves. As we've said over and over again, people in power want to keep power or try and increase it, and will only give up power when they fear losing their power completely. That's chapter 21, sections 3 and 4. Hope that helps and made some connections for you. Thanks.